Morning, everyone, and welcome. So happy to be with you all this morning. My name is Jeremy Cherney, and I'm the owner of Tobin Solutions. I'll be your presenter today. Today, we're going to be learning and discovering about SharePoint and OneDrive. We're going to talk about, what they are. We're going to talk about key features and really how to get started with it. Along the way, you may have some questions. You can certainly drop those into the chat, and I'll do my best to answer those. And we'll also open things up at the very end for additional question and answers. Also, you'll receive a brief survey and the presentation slides via email. So, please complete that survey because your feedback is really valuable. It helps us understand what works and what doesn't work about these webinars. So, before we jump into what Microsoft SharePoint and OneDrive is, let's talk about how you get it. So SharePoint and OneDrive, if using the online versions, is all part of Microsoft 365, which is formerly known as Office 365. It's a monthly subscription service from Microsoft. They have different tiers of service that include different offerings. It's a cloud solution, meaning Microsoft is going to host and manage the applications. They're going to host your data on their servers, and they have a 99% plus uptime guarantee. Tobin Solutions can assist you with security, support, migration, administration, integration, and development. So you got a good partner in Microsoft 365 with Tobin Solutions. I use this picture of the Swiss Army knife. I love it just because there are so many things you get with Microsoft 365. And, if you think about the tools on a Swiss Army knife, you can use the blade to try and undo, turn a screw, but it's much easier to use the screwdriver when you want to turn a screw. So it's always about, with Microsoft 365, is using the right tool for the right job. And so I'm going to show you about SharePoint and how those can show up as a tool for you and how you can use them. I mentioned there's different tiers of Microsoft 365. These are a lot of the common tiers that a lot of our clients use. There's other tiers of service as well. But most of our clients are in one of these. So there's a basic tier where you're using Office Online, and there you also get the file storage and sharing of SharePoint and OneDrive. You get email and Microsoft Teams. You also have the standard edition, which adds on the full desktop version of Microsoft Office. Or if you don't need their email and Teams and that, you can also just use the apps for business, which is really just using Microsoft Office and SharePoint. Fourth tier is a slightly newer tier. That is where you have everything that's in the full Microsoft Office. You get all of the goodies of Microsoft 365. They also add on advanced security to that too. So you get some security enhancements to their anti-spam, to device management, to data control. So if security is important to you, which we hope it is, that might also be something to look at. So what is SharePoint? It is been around for a long time. It's been around for probably 20 years. You might have heard the term an intranet, like an internal website just for your business use, to use inside your office, not your public facing website. With SharePoint, you can create this internal website. And with it, you can have it present information, you can have it present a calendar, but you can also store documents in there. And that's what we'll be talking about today, is inside of SharePoint, you can store documents and how you can get at those documents through regular SharePoint, OneDrive, and some other ways. And when you sign up with Microsoft 365, they create a default SharePoint site. It's called your team site. So you may already have this all set up for you. And within the team site, they have a document library, and that's where we'll talk more about how SharePoint stores their documents here, and we'll show you what that looks like. So SharePoint is much more than just document storage. Okay, here's a picture of what a SharePoint site could look like. You can put photos up there. You can have a calendar, you can have news, you can have information. Of course, you can put the documents in there. You can have links to other websites, and you can set this up so that only your team can see it. So they can see it from their desktop or laptop on a web browser, but they can also see it from a phone or tablet. And it's great because, this way you've got that internal news source, that internal information source, that internal knowledge base, that internal single source of truth for what's the vacation calendar, right? All those kinds of things you can put inside SharePoint and make it accessible to everybody internally. And that's nice because now you have the security that you've already got around Microsoft 365. And now you've also got being able to expose information with SharePoint through the team site and being able to control who can see that inside your office. But today, like I said, we are focused on documents. So let's start about where some of you may already be. Like many of you, you have probably had a traditional file server that you have in your office, and you've got your documents stored there. And maybe you've got a shared drive that you all use, depending on your company, it might be your S drive or your P drive or whatever that is, your M drive, it's going to be different depending on who set this up a long time ago, what that drive letter is. But you've got that shared drive, and that's where, you're putting all your common documents and folders and things like that. You may also have a private drive on the server, and oftentimes that's called your W drive or your U drive or sometimes your Z drive, and that is still on the server, but when you go into your private drive, your W drive or your U drive, you're only seeing your documents, and your neighbor they have their U drive and they're only seeing their documents in there. So you've got this world where there's these shared documents and then these private documents. And then often you're organizing them into folders, and then you use something like Windows Explorer, like this image shows, to find the documents, to move documents around, or you open up Word and then you browse to your shared drive and find the folder you want and do what you do there. Okay, so that's the familiar. And we have a lot of muscle memory around that. We have, for some of you, decades of organization that's gone into that. Sometimes well planned out, sometimes not so well planned out. Sometimes just, kind of grew organically. Why I mention that is if you decide to move to Microsoft SharePoint and OneDrive, there might be an opportunity to organize files the way you'd like them to be organized, as if you were going to be doing it brand new, knowing what you know now with how your business operates today with your decades of experience, then you would have a opportunity to reorganize and do all of that in this new project. Someone's asking you a question about, do you need to have Microsoft 365 to utilize this? Yes, that is correct. You said you're using a single user Microsoft account. So I'm not sure what you mean by the single user, but you do need the subscription to Microsoft 365. So if you have, yep, that's what you would need. So if you can clarify your question, what you mean by single user. Otherwise, yeah, you need to have the subscription, but it's included in almost all the ones I showed you. So like I said, you can store files in SharePoint and OneDrive. So let's start to look at what that looks like for you. So first of all, instead of having the documents stored on your internal file server, now they're going to be stored in the Microsoft cloud. So Microsoft has data centers filled with servers and storage, and that is where your documents will be, all securely stored within the Microsoft cloud. You don't really use drive letters anymore. In SharePoint, you store things in what are called document libraries, and you can create different document libraries. And then you also have OneDrive, which is your private document library inside of SharePoint. You can use folders if you want, but it's certainly not required. In fact, some best practices say don't use folders, but that's shifting again back. So some people still like that familiar way. And but now you no longer just have to use your Windows Explorer. Now you can use web browsers. You can use the OneDrive client. You can do more with that. And once things are up in the cloud and with SharePoint and OneDrive, you also now have the ability to access your files from anywhere and sync your files to your devices, kind of like a Dropbox-like solution where you can take those documents and sync them down to your hard drive or laptop for offline use or for fast use. We'll jump into that a little bit as well. So The idea is now taking your files off of your server, moving them into SharePoint and OneDrive. As I mentioned, when you put them in SharePoint, you put them into what are called document libraries. With that default team site I showed you earlier, you get a single document library in there. You can create more document libraries. You can rename those document libraries, but that's ultimately where the documents get stored. It's that secure place where you're going to put your documents in. Your team can access them and you can organize them. So you might create a document library for the finance team. You might create a document library for HR. Might create a document library for sales. And why you might do that is, one is it helps organize your documents into those functional areas, but it also helps with setting security. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about that as well. But when you set those security at a document library level, then only those people that have access to that document library can get access to those files. Why that's useful is obviously if you want to protect your HR information, that maybe only the business owner and the HR department has access to it. Maybe people in sales may not need access to the HR folders that you have stored in the document library. We'll get a touch into that a little bit as we go forward. This is a big source of confusion here, and then Microsoft does themselves no favors with the way they've labeled and named everything. So when we talk about SharePoint before, and we talk about those document libraries, and we talk about those team sites, those are meant to be shared throughout the organization or as you see fit. OneDrive is kind of a special document library that everybody gets with their Microsoft 365 account. So when you log in, you're going to have your own OneDrive for Business library, and you're not going to see those other features like with SharePoint, where you can put a calendar and those kinds of things. It's really designed just for documents, your Word, Excel, PowerPoint, PDF files, things like that. And by default, you're the only one that can see that what's in your OneDrive for Business library. So by default, it's secure right out of the box and all set up for your use. And again, once it's in OneDrive for Business, any documents you put up in there, you'll be able to access them from any device at any time. One of the questions we get when people are thinking about this, and I bring this up as we talk about, you're looking at SharePoint, you're looking at OneDrive, you're saying, I'm using it now, I want to learn some new things, or we're thinking about going to it. We're not sure, what this looks like or really how to do it, or some of these questions that you hear. This is one we get a lot. Where do you put your documents? Do you put them into SharePoint document library, or do you put them into OneDrive? Like I said, the OneDrive is more your personal side of things, but even when it's in OneDrive, you can still share it inside your organization. But it's kind of a hassle. The security isn't quite as granular or specific as you can do with OneDrive, with the document libraries. So what we recommend is, for the documents that you're going to be sharing inside your organization, put those in the SharePoint document libraries, set those up, by team or department. You may have just one document library. You might have multiple document libraries for different departments. Set the permissions and security you need there, and then just use your OneDrive for your own documents. Maybe you might share some documents in there with, an assistant or somebody like that. But if you're going to start sharing them with 3 or 4 people inside your organization, maybe create a group around that and create a document library and just assign that group to that document library rather than putting it in OneDrive, because what you'll find is managing the permissions later on can be a bit of a headache. So you definitely recommend, everything in its place. Get your common documents, your shared documents in the document library, and put your personal documents in OneDrive for Business. Now, a bit more about document libraries. There's some really cool features. The libraries when you put your documents and you move them off of your main, your on-premise in-house file server, and you put them out into SharePoint in a document library, you can now have some new features that you didn't really have easy access to before. And we'll touch on a few more of these in detail, but a couple of the big ones you see is one is you get co-authoring of Office documents, meaning instead of opening a document having being read-only, now multiple people can be in the document at the same time. You also have the ability to do versioning. We'll talk more about that, where OneDrive or SharePoint will automatically save old versions of your documents as you're working on them. So rather than you taking a document, how do we do it now? You create a copy of it and then you make changes to that. You rename the old one. This, you can get away from that. You may not have to do that. You can now just use the versioning to go see the old one. You have way more ways to look at your documents through customizable filters and views, notifications, workflow. You can sync files with the OneDrive sync client. Someone's asking about that. There is a OneDrive application that we'll talk a little bit more about and how you use that. And then the recycle bin is inside of these SharePoint sites. When people delete things, you can get access to them. You can also do searching well beyond what is just being searched for by the name, and you can even add fields, and we'll talk about that as well, which just becomes a real powerful feature. So we talked about, I mentioned co-authoring. What that means is people can edit the same file at the same time. And it's just built into Microsoft Office. If you've got your documents stored in SharePoint or stored in OneDrive, and you're using the latest version of Microsoft Office 2016 or above, you will automatically be able to do what's called co-authoring. So if you open up a document and someone else goes in and opens up that same document, instead of getting that message that you used to get on your file server where it said, this file is locked and you can only open it read-only, now you can actually open the document at the same time. And if you want to, you can edit the document and you can watch others edit in real time. So maybe you've got we use this at Tobin a lot when we've got our meeting agendas before our leadership meeting. People are often going in and doing their last minute updates to their scorecard or our agenda. And rather than having to get people out so you can go and make your edits, everyone's just in doing it at the same time. And you'll see at the top of your window when you're doing that, you'll see little pictures of people if they've got their picture or their initials there. You can see who's in the document. You can watch them update in real time. As you see in the background there, you can see the little flags that are showing up with people and where they actually are in the document. And it's great. And you can not only do that from the full version of Office on your desktop, but you can also do it within a web browser. And you can also do it from your iPhone, Android phone, tablet. Any device now supports those co-authoring features. So you can be in there and do things at the same time. So you want to look at, this is a really cool feature. You can track the changes, super handy. We're seeing a lot of people, that's one of the reasons they actually move documents here, is because they want to be able to be in them at the same time now with this world of collaboration, excuse me, and especially with collaboration when people aren't in the same office. People are starting to come back to the office now. Some people may never come back to the office. And so you're working with people, you're in one home, they're in another home, or one person's in the office, another person is still home working. It's not as easy to yell across the room and say, hey, get out of that spreadsheet so I can go in and edit it. You can still do those kinds of things, but instead of doing that, you can now do the co-authoring mode. So recommend, that's a great reason, a great use case for why you might want to move to SharePoint. Versioning. So automatically, once you've got documents stored in SharePoint, or using a modern SharePoint site that has versioning turned on, you will now see every time a document saved, you're going to see the date it was modified. You're going to see who modified it and any, the size and the comments. And it's just there automatically. So when you're inside of your documents, there'll be an option to look at the old versions. From there, you can just do either view or delete the old version, or you can even restore the old version, or you can compare multiple versions together. So you can take, the old version, the new version, and look and see exactly what changed. And that's all built in. So there's nothing you have to do, nothing you have to enable, as long as you've already got it enabled. Again, if you've had Microsoft 365 for a long time, you may not have it enabled by default, or you're using an old version of a SharePoint site that doesn't have it enabled. So it's easy to add on, get that going, and now you've got the versioning set up. Much easier to find out what happened. If somebody made a change, you're like, hey, who did this? Who changed this document? What did it look like before? Something looks great, then I want to congratulate them on, or something doesn't look great, and I want to sort out what changed. You've got that versioning in there. Someone's asking about disabling autosave. So what autosave does is it makes sure that while you're working on a document, you it's always saving in the background. And if you're co-authoring documents, you often want that turned on so that as you're working, you're going to see those changes in real time. For some people, they don't like the autosave. They want to be in control of that. If you're in the current version of Office 2019 or 2016, you've got in the upper left-hand corner of your Word or Excel, there's a little place where it says autosave on or off, and you can just turn that off right there. There is a place, I think, to do it globally, and I don't know where that is off the top of my head, but you can turn it off there and it'll remain off for the duration when you do that. So that's versioning. Definitely recommend to try that out. That's another great feature. Saves a lot of copying and renaming documents when all you're really trying to do is organize current versions versus old versions on your standard file server. This just does it for you in the background. So I mentioned this OneDrive application, or OneDrive and a OneDrive application. So this is where it gets a little confusing. So Microsoft has SharePoint, and then they've got as I mentioned, a place to put documents in with your document library. And then they have a OneDrive place inside of SharePoint where you keep your personal files. One of the benefits of having things in SharePoint is the ability to then see those documents from any device, or to be able to see them in kind of a native Windows Explorer style format on your desktop or on your Mac. And so Microsoft's solution to that was coming up with the OneDrive application. The OneDrive application works on Windows, works on Mac, iOS, and Android. And with it, you can see, when you open up the OneDrive application, you can see the files you have stored in your OneDrive folder. And you'll see them on your desktop or inside the application. And it's also the place where you can see the document libraries that you have in SharePoint, especially if you're doing this from a device like your smartphone or tablet. You can also, if you've got this set up on Windows, you can synchronize folders like your My Desktop and My Documents folders can also sync right up to OneDrive. So while we talk about the separation of SharePoint document libraries and SharePoint OneDrive for Business, there's a single OneDrive application that exposes both to you. So it's a handy tool, even if it's a bit confusing, but for a lot of people, it does what they want, which is they want to be able to go into Windows Explorer and see their documents without having to go through the web interface to SharePoint. And it allows you to synchronize them, kind of like a Dropbox functionality. So, maybe you've got a laptop and you've got your documents there and you want to synchronize them down because you're going to go on a plane and you want to be able to work on those documents. Go work on the documents. When you get back and you've got internet, you can flip that on. It'll synchronize those documents back up into SharePoint document library or OneDrive. So it's very handy if you use that feature. Not everybody uses it, not everybody needs it, but if you want to use it, that's the way to do it. Someone was asking about, what is the OneDrive app, and yeah, it's like I said, Microsoft has it a little confused about how they push that out and remind people about it, but it is a powerful tool in making your documents that are up in the cloud accessible easily from any device, whether you're online or offline. One of the nice things that, once you've got your documents up in SharePoint or OneDrive and you want to access them from the web, you can do that. So Microsoft 365, you can log into that via web browser. So you'd log in at https://office.com. You can see all your documents there that you have access to. Again, those are ones you've worked on recently. These are ones you might have in OneDrive. These are ones you might have in SharePoint document libraries. Some people really like this. They might already be doing this. Maybe, you've been using Google Docs or Google Drive somewhere else in your life, or maybe you're using it at work. And you kind of have that familiarity of, okay, I log in, I open up a web browser, I go in and I see my files inside of what's stored in Google Drive. You can do the same thing with Microsoft. So some people really like that. Some people don't, kind of depends. And the but it's another way you can get to your documents, and it's a real light method. It's easy to just kind of jump in, open up a web browser. You can even create, shortcuts to these different things. You can create a shortcut to your document library, make it easy to go in and find those documents. Someone's asking about where your files are when you sync them on the computer. What it typically does when you sync them is under your user account on the computer, it'll be your name, and then there'll be a folder called OneDrive, but you'll also see it inside of Windows Explorer as well. It'll be listed as OneDrive. And then you'll see in there, it'll show OneDrive, and it'll have like your name, and that becomes your personal OneDrive. And then if you've also got OneDrive syncing or accessing any document libraries, you'll see the name of those SharePoint sites listed. So thanks for the question. And the other questions for everyone. Appreciate that. Again, so a little bit deeper dive on that. Like I said, from any web browser, you can go in and you can browse to your SharePoint document library, and you'll see this web-based version of the document stored there. So here you can clearly see we're in the marketing team SharePoint site. We're in the documents library. So by default, it created this documents library for us. And these are the folders and files that are in there. So you can see the different documents, you can see the date, you can see who modified them. If you want to search, right at the top, there's a search bar. You can go in and search your library or search all of your documents and find things. You can also bookmark this. Like I said, it's a web page. So any of these any of these websites you go to inside of SharePoint, because it is all exposed through a web browser, can be bookmarked and organized. You also have this ability to easily sort and change how your documents are listed here by filtering or changing the view. So you can sort by a different level or filter out on certain dates. And you can also add a column, which we're going to talk about what that looks like, because I think that's a really important feature. So by default, let me add one more piece to this. So you've got this upload button. So when you're in a document library and you click upload, you can drag and drop documents in, or you can browse to a folder path on your server and upload the documents. And what you're going to get by default is the name of the document, who modified it, and the date. That's great. And the ability to add additional columns to this really can add some power to those documents. So you have this add column button here. You click on that, and then you're going to get presented with something like this to create a column. So you can define what you want the name of the column to be, what the description is, what type of column it is. And now for every single one of those documents listed there, you now have another field to further categorize those documents. And you can create your own fields. You can create a drop-down list of predefined items. You can create a free-form field. You can have multiple fields. So one of the ways we use this at Tobin is we scan all of our receipts and invoices from the people we make payments to, any of the vendors we buy things from, our office supplies, things like that. And we scan those as a PDF, and then we have a document library set up where it is just for storing images of our invoices and receipts. So that's helpful. But what makes it even more helpful is we added a column with our called PO number. And that's the PO number that we paid for or ordered the office supplies from. So when we scan it, we scan the document, we put it in there, we go into that custom field, and now we add the PO number to it, and now it makes it a column that we can sort by PO number, we can search by PO number, we can even filter on PO number. Or maybe you've got types of documents up there, and you've got a place where you've got a document library, and you have, oh, I don't know, contracts in there, and you've got different kinds of contracts that you work with. And maybe you've got contracts that are, let's say you're a lawyer, and maybe you've got contracts that are like real estate agreements or business agreements, or contracts to sell or to purchase, or whatever those are. You can create a column with a drop-down list of those various contract types. So when you put your document in or create a new document, you then go into that view, you change that field to drop down what kind of document it is. And now again, you can now search and sort very easily on those contract types. You can have multiple columns, you can filter and sort differently. So it's a really great way to take your document library and start turning it into some document management features, starting to add some other things. Maybe it's a project that you've got documents for a specific project number, and you want to create a field called project number. And then you go in, and every time you add a new document, you put that project number in. Now you can filter and say, just show me the documents for this particular project. So it's real easy to do. Looks like somebody's having some issues with that. We might have to sort out why you don't have that. It could be a permissions issue or something else you might be missing. We have to come back to you. It looks like you got some specific things to you. But again, great feature to do this. And you can then see these again when you bring up SharePoint on your phone or your tablet. Let's say you've got marketing materials for a project or a product you sell. You could be with a client, have your iPad out there, open up, bring up SharePoint on your iPad, go into the document library and say, just show me the marketing material for our new product, and then bring those up and easily find those and show your client what, the marketing materials you want to show them, or email into them, or whatever that looks like. So kind of going on a little bit about that, but it's a very powerful feature and a very cool feature that you can do, which you just simply don't easily have available when you're storing these on your C drive or on your server. So Microsoft uses SharePoint as basically the default storage for all the documents. So I told you can get at those documents through the SharePoint app or through the web browser or right from within Office, but you can also get at them through Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams does not have its own storage mechanism for documents. It uses other storage mechanisms. So if you're using Microsoft Teams and you've got a team set up, by default, it created a SharePoint document library in the background for you to do that. But when you're looking at these documents through Teams, these are actually being stored still in SharePoint. So you can kind of bounce back and forth. You can look at them through SharePoint interface. You can look at them through the Teams interface, but it's the same document. It's all stored in SharePoint. So all those features I'm talking about are available, and you can see those in both places. So if you're starting to use Teams or thinking about using Teams and wondering how that SharePoint and that operates, they just integrate seamlessly together. And so for some people that are really getting into using Microsoft Teams, and maybe that's the place they're really doing their work and they're trying to put their files, then you don't have to learn as much about SharePoint. You can just learn how to collaborate using in Teams, but those co-authoring features, those versioning features, those permissions that we were talking about you can put on, all can be put on through Microsoft Teams as well. So another way to access documents inside of from SharePoint is through Microsoft Teams. One of the nice features that Microsoft added starting in Microsoft 2016 is much tighter integration with SharePoint and OneDrive. So what SharePoint and OneDrive can do now when you've got them linked with Microsoft Office is you can actually read and write directly to your OneDrive or different sites in SharePoint. So this is an open dialog or save a copy dialog inside of Word, or maybe no, PowerPoint. And you can see this save a copy. Look at these options I've got. I've got save directly to my OneDrive. So it says OneDrive Tobin Solutions, and it's got my email address there. So that's my personal OneDrive folder. So I can save directly to that OneDrive. I don't have to map a drive to it. I don't have to drag and drop or use the upload or any of that kind of thing. I can do it directly from Microsoft Office. If I'm using a team site or any kind of SharePoint site or document libraries, if I click on sites, I'm going to see all the different sites I've got available. So if I were to click on sites, you'll then see on the right side, instead of seeing these different folders, you'll see the different SharePoint sites that are available. And then you can drill into those and get to the document library you want. If you're using OneDrive Personal, which is a separate version of OneDrive, again, for Microsoft to completely confuse the OneDrive world, and you still have a OneDrive Personal account that maybe you used with when you set up your computer originally, you can access that there. And then, of course, if you want to browse your computer or your server, any of those, you can click those other locations to make that easy to get to as well. So again, nice feature, the ability to go in, open, create, save documents directly from Office into SharePoint and OneDrive is real powerful integration. So if you're not using the latest version of Microsoft Office, you're not going to see that. That'll be a reason why you might want to be using those latest versions so that you can use that feature to be able to do this. Another thing you can do when you've got these documents up inside of SharePoint and OneDrive is the ability to easily share documents. So how do you share documents inside your office right now? You probably do it a couple of different ways. One is you might email somebody a document. Here's the budget to, I'm the CFO and I'm working on the budget and I want to send it to the president of the company. So how do I do that? I might send them, the full path that's on our S drive, finance, budget 2021, send them a link to that. Most of the time what we end up doing is we end up sending an attachment, right? We copy that file as an attachment, send it over to them, which gets them what they need as far as that document goes. But now you've lost that link back to the original. If they want to make changes or edits, if you make a change or edit, you have to email it again. So it's a lot easier to do it when you're sharing documents inside of OneDrive and SharePoint by just using the share button. So if you're in that budget, you're in that proposal, you're in whatever it is inside of Microsoft Office, and you've got that latest version that integrates with Microsoft 365 and SharePoint, you're going to have a share button right at the top. You click that share button and you're going to get this little dialog box. It says, what do you want to do? Do you want to send a link, and who do you want to send it to? And if you've got permissions turned on, you can even send links to people outside of your organization. So you want to make sure if you've got, that you want to allow that to happen, but you have that ability so that someone, again, you don't have to email them a document. You can email them a link to the document that'll always be the current version of the document, because it's a link, it's no longer the actual document. So when you're sending this and you say share, you can send it via Outlook, or you can copy the link. You can pick the names of people. You can pick, what you want them to be able to do. Where is that? Oh, I don't have that here. So you can control the permissions. Can they edit this document? Is it read only? What is it they can do with this document? Really handy. Then they can just click on it from the email. They can see it from anywhere. If they're a mobile device user and they've got, they're logged in from their phone or their tablet into Microsoft 365, and they've got the OneDrive app, and they've got the SharePoint application, and they've got Teams, they've got all those things on their phone. Again, it makes it really easy to go full mobile with your documents and not having to worry about what's stored on the server, or worrying about having a VPN to your server. You'll actually have all the documents everywhere you go. This is a much easier way to share things rather than emailing things. That's what our recommendation is, to do these. You can even set links to expire after a period of time. So let's say you do email something to an outside office, you email them a link, an outside party, and you email them a link to a document, you can say if they don't open that link within 15 days, it expires. Get some power around those kinds of things. A lot easier than emailing attachments back and forth. So check out that sharing. Another nice thing you can do once you've got things inside of SharePoint and OneDrive is you can start to take advantage of some of the workflow and automation capabilities that exist within Microsoft 365. So one thing that people like is what's called the approval workflow. You think about that, you may have a process like this inside your organization. Let's pick something in the world of sales. So maybe you're working on a proposal for a client and you start to put together a proposal, but the sales manager needs to sign off on it before you can send it to the client. What you can do is you can set up an approval workflow where you can have a document, and before it can be seen by others, it has to be approved. So as soon as you create the document and you save it, an alert will go to your sales manager. Sales manager will see that you want to have them review this document. You can look at the document as a sales manager. You can send it back to make changes or edits or anything like that. Or if you like it and you see it looks good, you can then click approve, and now that document now actually shows up in a space in SharePoint where now other people can see it. It's now approved as the current document. Another great place to do that is company policies. Maybe you've got HR policies out there about, vacation policy, and you have that written as a Word document, and you're the HR person, you're making an update to that, but you need final approval from the president of the company before it shows up. So you can save the document into that folder. Only you will see it. The president will get an approval notice saying, hey, we want to approve this document. If they then click approve, that document will now show up for everybody inside the HR folder. Some of these things, a demo would work a little bit better, but it also take a little more time to watch inside this webinar. So what I just want you to get out of this and some of these other things we're talking about, we want you to learn some things, and I'm sure some of you are getting some new things out of this of, how to do some things, but it's also just to kind of know that it can do it. When we talk about discovery, it's thinking about where SharePoint and OneDrive, not just for how you've always done document storage, but what's possible now with some of these new features. How could you use these inside of automating a business process that you have, adding in more accountability, saving time, being more efficient. Where can you do these? Some of these show up in these workflow and automation. How do you announce when there's a new document available? Well, there's a couple different ways you could do that, right? How do you do it now? If their budget spreadsheet's updated, you might email everybody, hey, the budget spreadsheet is updated. Go ahead and go take a look at it. Or here's a link to it. Go take a look at it. If you are somebody who wants to see that budget spreadsheet on a regular basis, you can actually subscribe to alerts on the budget spreadsheet. And every time it gets updated, you can get an email alert. Or if documents are added to a particular folder, you can get an email alert. Or maybe you want to have a digest that gets sent to you on a daily or weekly basis of all the documents that got changed in a particular folder or document library. You can subscribe to alerts with that. So again, handy so that you're getting notified when there's new things to look at rather than somebody having to do the notification with you. Microsoft also has another technology called Power Automate. Power Automate is like a link between applications to add automation. So for example, you can say, whenever an email is received, automatically take the attachments from the email and store them in a particular SharePoint document library. Or every time a document is added to a particular document library, you can have Power Automate take a copy of that document and upload it to a Dropbox folder, or to send an email when something gets added. So there's a lot of different ways you can use this. Again, not so much like how to do it, because some of these um, are alone a half-day webinar, but just know that these exist. Know that you can do more with your documents. If you find yourself doing a lot of manual clicking and moving and organizing and notifying, there's probably some ways you can automate that to save yourself some time and energy and be able to focus on other aspects of what you do. So again, great benefit. Once things are up in SharePoint and OneDrive, you've got these powerful workflow and automation features. SharePoint and OneDrive is definitely a different kind of experience than going to that familiar drive that you always went to on your server, always going to your S drive and your U drive and knowing where things are. For some people, you've got 20, 30 years of muscle memory around that. You've got some people who are not really interested in change. They don't want to learn something new. They don't want to learn SharePoint. And I'm not judging, you know, people, not everybody loves change. People are busy. And yet they might want some of these features that you would get by having things moved up into SharePoint. So there's a product out there that's separate from Microsoft. It's a separate license you'd have to purchase from a different company. We've got some clients that are really loving it, and it's called Z Drive. When you install Z Drive on your workstation, what it does is it maps a drive to SharePoint for you. So from your perspective, you're still seeing your S drive and your U drive, but now all those files are stored up in SharePoint and OneDrive, and Z Drive makes that possible. So for some people, this is their next stop when they want to move things to SharePoint, is they want to get things into the cloud. They want to start adding some of those features like the co-authoring and the versioning and the workflow, but they've got some people that just want to keep using drive letters the way they used them before. Z Drive is a great option for that. We've got some clients, like I said, that really love it, and it made a much easier learning path for people. So if you're thinking about SharePoint, but you got some people who just don't want to learn that new way of accessing things through a web browser or through sites or those other things I was showing for you, Z Drive may be a good fit. And you can mix and match. So you might have a couple people using Z Drive, but not everybody has to use it. So you might have that one person who just does not want to change, wants to use things the way they always did. You can give them Z Drive and they can get access to all the same files and folders. So another way to kind of lowering the barrier to entry to getting into using SharePoint and OneDrive. Tobin Solutions focuses on security, being security strong. There's some security to look at when you've got Microsoft 365. It can get complex. And we want it to be done right so that the security you expect on your files is there and you're not accidentally sharing or leaking any information out to the world that you don't want to have happen because the permissions and security isn't set up right. So here's a few bullet points of some things you want to be thinking about with security. First of all, document what your policies are on sharing and security. What is it that you want to be able to do? Do you want people to be able to share a link to a document inside of SharePoint outside your organization? The answer might be yes. A lot of people do it these days, may be totally fine. Maybe it's just a specific site you want to do that with. Maybe you've got a marketing site and you've got some, marketing materials and those, yeah, you obviously might want to share those with people. So that might be one where you want to share that, but you may not want to be able to share outside links to documents in your finance document library. So you want to sit down and go through and create what those policies are. Doesn't take a long time, but you want to make sure you get it done right. And then once those policies are defined, then we go through these different screens that I'm showing you here to go in and set the types of permissions you've got. Make sure those are set up. Also the ability to create what are called least privilege permissions. So rather than giving everybody access to everything, only the people who are in finance should have access to finance. Only the people who need HR should have access to HR. Only the people that need sales should have access to sales. We do that because if the salesperson's account is ever breached, maybe they let their password get away from them and they did not have two-factor authentication turned on for their Microsoft 365 account, and someone logs in, they're only gonna be able to see what they have access to. They're only gonna be able to see things in those sales document libraries. They're not going to automatically have access to finance and HR. So that becomes part of your policy. That least privilege is a really important security concept that we're building into everything we do these days. You also want to know, how do you recover data when somebody accidentally deletes it? Because that's going to happen. So you want to understand how the recycle bin works, how long things stay there, how do you remove things from the recycle bin, undelete. And lastly, best practices are still best practices. The 3-2-1 backup best practices, where you have 3 copies of your data, is still something you want to look at and include in what you're doing with Microsoft 365. Just because Microsoft is hosting it in their data center and on their cloud and backing it up for you doesn't mean you want to avoid complete responsibility. It doesn't mean you want to abdicate all of that to Microsoft. Those that do end up getting burned in some fashion. We've seen it over and over again. If you've got a complete site outage, Microsoft is really great at being able to recover that. If you delete 1,000 files by accident and they're outside of the recycle bin for some reason or whatever that looks like, it is not easy to go get those back. It takes something. It takes time and energy. So, you want to still following those best practices, even if you've got things stored in SharePoint and OneDrive. Again, part of your security policy. This is a great place to have a conversation with a SharePoint expert. You can always call us for those kinds of things, but help you make sure that whatever you're putting in is going to be secure. So how do you get started with SharePoint? One of the things we want you to do is consider, before you jump into it feet first, consider doing a proof of concept project. And you want to plan ahead for that. We've seen people where they just bring in, their IT provider comes in and takes their shared drive, shoots it up to SharePoint, doesn't quite work the way they expect. The same organization misses that they might have had when they organized that folder a long time ago when they first set it up that don't match today's needs is there. So it's an opportunity to plan ahead. It's an opportunity to sort of reinvent and recreate how are you actually storing your documents? How do you want to organize them? So this is a 11-step plan, and invite you to take a look at it. So it's, first of all, who's going to be on this proof of concept team? Pick a couple of power users, people that got a little extra time, that don't mind trying some things out, learning how things operate, got a little extra time, that don't mind change. Pick those couple of people that are going to be on your team. Have them watch this webinar or have us come in and show you a little bit more about what SharePoint and OneDrive can do. Talk about what your business processes are. What is it you're actually trying to accomplish? And then we set out those goals. What are the goals that you want to do? It might be you just want to move those documents, but maybe you want to create a full-on SharePoint team site that not only has documents, but also has links that people use and your company calendar and other things. You want to set what those goals are, make sure those are clear. We want to get back in, get that security set up so that you're not exposing anything that you don't want to have exposed. You want to set up like, okay, how are you going to roll this out at your company? You want to start building in that change management. People hate change for the most part, right? They find it, whatever their story is around change, they don't like it. They haven't got time for it. What we had was good enough. All of those kind of familiar things people say. That's why you want to have that change management plan. You want to start to create those communications out to your organization. Hey, we're going to be moving, once you've vetted your proof of concept and you decide to move, you want to lay out that conversation for everybody. Hey, just so you know, we're going to be looking at going to Microsoft 365 and SharePoint and OneDrive. Here's how it's going to go. You're going to get the training. We're going to make sure you know how this operates. Here's how the timing's going to go. All of those kinds of things so that you're not just dropping something in on people. That's what do they hate about, most people hate about change, is that it's poorly executed. This gives you an opportunity to really execute at a high level. Then you want to create a test plan. So let's say with this proof of concept team, you're going to grab some files from, let's say, finance folder, and that's what you want to be working with as part of this. Okay, great. So you've got a couple people on your finance team who are power users. How are we going to know if this works? How are we going to know that the documents are there, that they need, that they know how to use it? So you want to create that test plan so that when they're going through and verifying the documents look right, they know what they're looking for. Then you want to make sure that SharePoint and OneDrive are working the way you expect. We definitely recommend kind of doing things out of the box before doing a lot of customization on SharePoint and OneDrive, because there's a lot of customization you can do, but we want to make sure before you spend a lot of time and effort on that, let's vet the basics. Let's make sure that out of the box, it's going to do what you want to do for the most part. Add those other features later that you might want. Then you do those migrating of the documents. You actually get those documents up. You provide that orientation and training for people. Then you do that troubleshooting and follow-up questions. Let them use it for a while. Does this work for them? Is this operating the way they need? Are the features that they expect to be there? Are they productive? How did the rollout go? You know, any changes you need to make in your test plan or your change management plan. Get those results, and then you make a decision. Hey, we want to move everything to SharePoint, or hey, we just want to move our marketing folder because that's the only one we really want people to have full mobility with. Whatever that looks like, or hey, SharePoint's not for us right now. We're going to go back and just keep using our main file server in-house. Whatever you want, but you know, going through this process allows you to really understand how it operates, get a sense for how it works, so that you're really making an informed decision on what you want to do. So you can run through the proof of concept project. We're available to assist with a project like this as well. We've got a lot of experience helping customers get to SharePoint, and a lot of times they really love it. They can get rid of that old on-premise server in some cases, and now they've got access to everything they want. They've got organized the way they want. They've got full mobility, documents everywhere. So that is it. That is our SharePoint and OneDrive webinar. Thank you for being here today. We'll open it up for some Q&A. Again, my name is Jeremy Cherney, and I'm the owner of Tobin Solutions. If you would like to subscribe to our newsletter or social media, you'll hear about upcoming webinars. We're doing these monthly. Also, we can talk on security, other aspects of Microsoft 365. If you want to have this presentation done inside your office for your leadership team, if you're a board of directors somewhere on a nonprofit and you think they want to learn about this, or maybe you're in a Lions group or something like that where you've got some community involvement and you think they should also see this, or another presentation on security, let us know. We're happy to help with those. So again, thank you for being here. You're very welcome, James. Glad you could be here today. I'll be around for a few minutes and we'll be able to do that. Someone's asking about a recording. Yes, this is being recorded, and when you complete the survey, you'll get a link to the recording and the PDF of all the the PowerPoint. Otherwise, enjoy your summer. You're very welcome, Tim. Enjoy your summer. Enjoy the nice weather. Be safe, be well, and we'll see you around the next webinar.